Good morning and welcome, all you creative people. If you are new here, welcome to this channel. And if you've been here for a while, you've seen my latest project, which is these houses that are in my neighborhood. Working on these led me to a new idea this week. I'm so excited to share it with you. So as you'll know, if you've been here for a while, in order to help myself to invite myself to continue creating during this season of caregiving that I'm in, I decided to extremely limit my palette and make things really easy for me to get to my desk and paint. And so that's the impetus behind the house project. And I was using only 2 colors for that. But this week, I decided that because I've been working so much with texture, given that I limited my palette, that I should spend some time making some texture cards. Now, if you're not familiar with what these are, it's like making a swatching card for color, except this is for texture. So I'm playing with 4 colors that are on my palette and a whole bunch of different textures that I want to test out in different ways. And you might ask, well, why? And I'm going to show you in a minute what these can be useful for. One, they're just a whole lot of fun to work on, and it's really easy to get lost in the flow and just enjoy the colors that you're working with. In fact, if you ever follow Jean Haynes, or maybe you have her book or one of her books, one of them is called Paint Yourself Calm, she will recommend this kind of technique in order to just get yourself into a different and a nicer mind state, which it certainly does. And the colors, by the way, that I've chosen, Jean Haynes would say, are ones to improve calmness. It's like walking through the woods, right? The greens and the blues. So besides just the fun part of it, the parts that are so good for your mental health, these can also be really wonderful cards for launching you into a new and different kind of painting. This, by the way, is a Conte Paris crayon. They call it a crayon. It feels very much like a chalk, but it's water soluble, so it's really fun to work with. Anyway, more on the technique later. First, I'm telling you the whys in the hows. So in a sec, I'm going to show you a painting that I made after making a texture card and utilizing the texture card to launch me into a different kind of painting. So here's the painting that I did in the winter that has really been a lovely thing to look at on my wall for the last several months. And here's my original footage. So between this bookmark and this of the Lonely Planet Guide, that's what I'm using to start this painting. Okay, so there you have it. That footage, by the way, was from my very first YouTube video when I was still much more anxious and nervous about filming. Okay, so my first step, so this is now sped up to 2 times the speed so that I can show you, and you can see 3 cards that I've done in the same colorway already there. So first things first, I poured the Winsor & Newton texture medium onto the card, and then as you saw, I just poured the excess back into the bottle. This is kind of, I'm just trying to not control things, and that way if I just pour it onto the page, it helps me to control it a bit less. And then I use the stick to spread it out because it's going to control somehow the flow when I start to pour that water down. By the way, all these materials that I'm using, the colors, everything that I have here that you might be saying, what are the colors on your palette? What is that thing that you used? Just look in the description. I have links for all of the things. So that's a candle that I just used. I won't have a link to candles in my description. It's just a piece of wax. You can use any kind of piece of wax. If you have beeswax, if you have a very fancy art supply that is a wax crayon, if you put wax down, it's a resist, so the paint won't run there. And it's a way to preserve your whites. And as you'll see later on in this video, it can be a way to preserve a color that you like if you're pouring other colors over the top. So what I've done here is I did not wait for the texture medium to dry. Way too impatient for that. I just wanted to keep going with the flow that I had. But you could let that texture medium dry, and that would have a different effect. And texture medium will reactivate if you put water on it, so you definitely can play with it that way. So I just started to pour water, pour paints, and all I'm thinking about, now see, it's hard to think about what I'm thinking about because this is a very right-brained activity here, and the right brain is not in charge of talking. So it's like I will have to cross hemispheres in order to explain exactly why I'm doing. But here's one thing that I do know that I'm paying a lot of attention to as I'm in the flow of this process. I'm trying to create a wide variety of values. I'm trying to create darkest darks, lightest lights, and everything in between. And of course, I'm experimenting in every which way with the textures that I can get, with the texture medium, with the crayons, with graphite. I have a 4B pencil there that I think I used. With the sticks, I have a regular stick, well, I don't know, an unidentified stick from a walk, and also have some bamboo from my backyard. And that spray bottle that you see up in the upper sort of right hand, is an alcohol spritzer. And so when you spray that on top of your card, on top of your painting, you'll get a different effect than if you're spraying clean water onto your paintings. So I'm just experimenting and pushing and pulling with those values. After I get a lot of values down, you'll see me starting to lift back up. So I think what I'm realizing at this point in the painting is that I have a lot of strong texture and that I could offset that with some calmer areas. So like you see this interesting shape that I'm drawing here. Pretty soon the inside of that shape is going to be all scrubbed out, and it creates that juxtaposition of just a white area with a highly textured area, makes the whole thing far more interesting than if it was all textured. So sometimes you have to lift out or paint over areas that you perhaps really like in order for the other parts to shine. I feel like there's a truth in life with that somewhere, but I can't quite reach it. After a while, that shape, that square shape with the funny legs, it starts to read to me like a square jellyfish. And the more I look at it, last night I was watching a show with one of my sons, and I had my 4 little texture cards up on the wall because I watch TV, and really I'm just looking at my paintings and trying to guess what I should do next. Anyway, I was looking at this one quite a bit and thinking about if I did a bigger painting with square jellyfish, because it just seems so intriguing to me. This idea of this sort of underwater with, alien life forms. You know you're in the artistic flow when you're imagining a painting of square jellyfish. And what a wonderful place that is, by the way. I cannot tell you how good this is for my mental health. And so if you are in a place where, you just need a break from whatever life is throwing at you, I highly recommend getting some supplies, finding a little spot in your house where you can do this, and just coming back to it day after day, finding easy invitations to your own creativity, and something will pop up for you. That's all I have to say. Like, you have to start with something that's simple that you will go and do, and don't be judgmental. Just look at it and think, this is my curiosity. This is what I'm looking at. This is a painting on the way to something else. If I think of it as a journey, as I think of every painting as a journey on the way to another place, then I can be very into my process and not bring in some of those thoughts that I think come in for all of us. The thoughts of, well, is this any good? Right? That's a creativity killer right there. If you start to ask yourself if what you're making is good. Good doesn't matter. If you're curious about something and you keep following that curiosity, I think then you'll keep going. At least that's what I find for me. And banish all thoughts of whether something is good or not. Leave judgment out of it. Yeah. And really, that brings me to my other big thought, I guess, on art and art supplies and whether something's good or not good. A lot of times I hear people say that art supplies are very expensive. And I have to disagree, because I think, what is it doing for me? How much time am I spending with it? If I'm spending a lot of time with it and I'm getting a huge mental health boost by doing it, then what else could I compare it to? I've always said that painting and art has been the cheapest therapy that I've ever paid for. And it is. If it leaves me in a completely different and happier spot, then what is, $100 or $200? It's almost the same as a therapy session. It's the same as a massage. And those supplies, you can keep going with them. And what's a toothbrush? A toothbrush costs only $1.50. Here I am scrubbing out a little area that connects to the outside edge. Paying a lot of attention to the outside edges of your painting is a really worthwhile practice. So often, at least I know when I was starting painting and when I'm looking at what other people do when they're just starting, there's a lot of attention and focus on the middle part of the painting, the middle part of the page, the subject matter that you are working on. But if you haven't done this yet, if you haven't really considered every square inch of your page, especially the edges and corners, I suggest that you try to extend your mark making, your colors, your value study, all the way out to the edges. And look at paintings that you really like and see how they do it. I guarantee you, that they've extended their mark making and their colors all the way out, so that you can almost imagine that it could go on and on beyond the canvas or page or watercolor paper. Okay, so what I'm doing here, you saw me pull out one of my tubes that was acrylic white, and then I decided I didn't want to put on acrylic, so I pulled out the gouache, and it's a zinc white, so it's supposed to have less covering ability than the titanium white. So I decided to put some of that on because what I want to do is calm down an area, but I still want some of the paint that's underneath to shine through, so I want it to be semi-transparent, just like putting a piece of, you know, shoji paper or something like that over the top. I'm doing that with the gouache. I'm applying it with my stick just because you can apply it with anything, but if you're going to apply it with a brush, then you're also adding in water, and so I guess I find it easier to control the water content if I'm using a stick to apply it. The other strange thing with gouache that I have to tell you is that you may have seen, just as I was opening the tube, that I wiped a piece of it off first before putting some on that little palette. That's because it can get a little bit moldy, and I'm going to have to find a solution. There's a little bit of, you know, mold in the cap, so I probably need to spritz that with the alcohol spray or get some vinegar and rub it around in there. But gouache does have that tendency, which is watercolor does not have that tendency to develop some mold over time. Yep, so there I am, pushing and pulling, putting on a good layer of gouache, and then kind of scrubbing it out a little bit, seeing which layers can stay underneath. I think I ran out of ideas on that one, so I pulled another one to take a look at what I could do. And in this one, I'm using that candle wax, and on part of it, I am protecting the color. So I'm not just protecting the white of the paper, I'm protecting the color that was already down. It's important to remember that you can do that, because I think in a lot of cases we think about resists, we think about Frisket or wax crayons, every kind of thing like that, as protecting the white of the paper. But remember, if you have a beautiful yellow or blue or some kind of light color down, you can resist on top of that. When it's dry, you can resist on top of that, and then you can paint over a darker color, and it makes a very juicy effect, very delightful. In a sec, you'll see me scrubbing out a rather dark area from the corner, and pay attention to just how it changes the whole painting. So here we go. I'm using my cheap Mexican paintbrush to scrub in this corner that was rather dark. I'm using a piece of tissue paper because I find that compared with the paper towel, tissue paper leaves no trace. It doesn't have the puncture marks that the paper towel does, so it leaves a very soft, a soft lift. So you see how that corner kind of glows now. It's kind of a glowy yellow color instead of the darker, and it changes a lot. And I think once I did that, then I thought, ooh, I want that somewhere else in the painting, and so I picked this area kind of in the middle to lift and create a less textured, more uniform and light color, so that the textured parts can shine out because it's next to a very calm area. And you can see just how much the crayons react to water, where you can see that gray down there, and even up here where I'm going to make this corner very, very dark. Those crayons respond very well to water. You see me even dipping it into the water. After a while, if you do this long enough, you'll realize that you're not thinking specifically to do it in any order. Your intuition is starting to completely take over. So here are the 4 that I completed and that I keep looking at. I hope you try this project. I hope you have fun with it. Share on Instagram and let me know. I would love to take a look at what you've made. All right, so I'm going to leave you here with footage from one of our walks and that lovely, lovely door with the covered entry. And I will be back in a week or 2 weeks, depending on how often I can get to my desk. All right, have a wonderful day. Catch you next time.